Trusting your intuition will lead you to create a passionate and joy-filled life. Are you ready to get turned on to a new way of thinking? Are you ready to meet people who have conversations that speak to the things that truly light you up? What if you had access to a podcast that featured women just like you, who shared stories that empowered you to let go of a life tied to others' expectations and to start living in the now with passion and joy? I'm Jacqueline Rodriguez, founder of Your Intuitive Light Coaching, owner of Enlightened Styles Holistic Salon, and your host of the Intuitive Light podcast for the enlightened entrepreneur. My goal is to help women recognize how tightly they are tied to negative thoughts and other people's expectations, so that they can fully embrace and become the untethered CEO they've always wanted to be. You're about to meet some amazing women who will inspire you to untether yourself from any fears, negativity that you carry and become the untethered CEO of your life. This podcast is for you, woman, champion, warrior, entrepreneur, mother, phenomenon. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Intuitive Light podcast and show. I'm your hostess, Jacqueline Rodriguez, and I am on today with Tina Unrue, which she's already been on the show, so this is her second time around, and I'm really excited to dive in deeper to the assessment that she and I did together and just talk to you about what that is and what value I really saw from it and why you should be looking into getting the assessment. So without further ado, here is Tina.
Hello. Thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here again.
Yes, you're our first guest coming back for the second time. So that's super exciting.
What an honor.
Yeah. And the reason you're coming back is because we had such a great conversation the first time. And you do these assessments with your business. What is the name of the assessment again?
The Energy Leadership Index Assessment. Yeah. It can be a mouthful, but it is so well worth it. I promise.
It really is. And I think, I want you to tell all about it, but I know when we were talking about it, I loved everything we were talking about because, as you know, I love energy and I love how we integrate energy into our business because a lot of the times we don't think about that. But this is a really beautiful way to integrate that energy and see where you're at on a regular daily basis, and then also under stress, which I thought was super awesome to know and see where I was on a regular everyday basis, and then the under stress, because as a business owner, like we have a lot of stress sometimes,
Right?
We have different things, and as a mother and as a woman and the laundry list of what goes on, right?
That's right. If there's anything that women can relate to, it's stress, right?
Yeah. And what I love though is, with my teaching, like we want to take away that stress. I want people to live daily without all of that stress. And then when we do have stress, learn how to adjust our energy so that we can quickly get out of it.
Yes.
And your assessment was so on point. It was actually kind of scary, just in a good way. I don't mean it scary like bad, but scary how correct and accurate it was.
Yeah.
And to see that was super amazing. So tell us what this whole assessment is, and so everyone can kind of hear why I'm excited about it.
I would love to. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity again. So the last podcast, we talked about pretty much energy and leadership together for me equals mindset. So I just want to make sure we kind of repopulate that for people, right? And so we all have energy flowing through us, and we either consider ourselves leaders or not leaders, or maybe somewhere in the middle on the spectrum. And so the energy leadership index assessment is a way to measure both of those within you, which I think is really fascinating. I think everybody is very familiar with personality tests like Enneagram, and we'll just settle on that one because it's just, I think, pretty much the most popular these days.
Yeah.
And while I definitely agree that personality tests are beneficial, I just love the ELI because it is what's called an attitudinal assessment, which means it measures your attitudes, your perceptions, your mindsets, right? That's what it measures. And if you think about it, that's just that's fascinating to me. I think it's just amazing that you can take something that seems so kind of undata-like, right? It's something that you really can't quantify or measure, but yet we measure it. And so the ELI pretty much just measures your average resonating level of energy, which means just on a day-to-day basis, where do you fall across using all of the 7 levels of energy versus how you respond under stress, which is what you had talked about. And we all have to agree to the fact that we do not respond under stress the same way we do when we're not under stress. We all, especially as moms and as business owners, we get the fact that we, can approach something in a typical way, but then when we're under stress, maybe we lose our temper, right? Maybe we become very closed off, right? Maybe we respond in a way that we tend to wish we hadn't, you know what I mean? And know that it's not your normal MO. So I just love the fact that this assessment measures your attitudes, not just your personality, and it gives you the ability to move up and down the spectrum, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Just embracing the fact that we are humans and we're complex. We don't fit in a box. So you're not always an Enneagram 8 or 2, right?
Yes.
So that's what I love.
And I would have to agree because I'll be honest, when you set up or you told me about the assessment, my first thought was, oh, okay, this is another personality assessment. Like, cool, I'll do it. And I told you this when we did the follow-up, right?
Yeah.
When I got it and I saw that this was something completely different and that it really measured how I act, how my energy is on a daily basis, I was just so enthralled with the whole process. And I thought it was so cool because it was so accurate. And when you see the graph and you see how things are measured out, and then with you going over the assessment with us and telling us, because my first immediate response to it, which I told you, was, what? A 2? Yep, that's where my brain went. So for all the followers, and so you know what I'm talking about, my levels, my day-to-day level was, oh gosh, now I can't remember.
I have your sheet.
Yeah, okay, great. I'm glad.
Although I won't show it here, but what she's talking about is the fact that you have, we give you a report that shows you what your average resonating level is and how it's allocated across all the 7 levels of energy. And so your longest bars, in essence, for your average resonating level were at levels 6 was your highest. So you had a little over 20% in that one, and level 5, which was at 19.8. So they were almost neck and neck. But the 2 that you were referencing was the longest bar, which means your predominant amount of energy under stress, and that was at 28.9%.
Yes. And that was the immediate one that I looked at, and I'm like, what? Anger? No, that's not okay. That's not how I want to resonate or come across. But it was under stress.
That's right. You had very little, you had less than 10% in your average day to day.
That's awesome. And that is what was cool about you going through everything with us, is showing how just because how you deal with things when you're under stress doesn't define you.
Right.
And that was the big clue for me when you went over everything and then gave me the overall, how I'm very high and the way I want to resonate on a daily basis is how I am coming across and resonating. And then we got a chance to go over and find out why the 2 is okay, and why it's actually very important to help keep you balanced, and how quickly I'm able to get out of the 2 because we have tools to help us raise our vibrations. Right. And now I'm aware of it, which also, you give great tools on how to adjust that. And I just thought it was really fascinating that my mind automatically went to the bad. And now, which is really fascinating because I have a lot of tools to not do that.
Yes.
But I'm human.
That's right.
And it still was my immediate response. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, okay, it's all right for me to have some too. And it means nothing negative. So I want to hand it over to you and let you kind of go through what those were and like how you approach the assessment with people.
So thank you. So negativity bias is a real thing, y'all, right? Just psychologically, it is a real thing, which means our brain is tuned into anything that's negative, right? And we tend to kind of focus on it. And so when you were looking at your report and you saw the 2, you were like, hold up, wait a second, right? Yeah. And it's always so entertaining to see how people respond to these things, because if they answer the questions honestly, then it really is extremely accurate. And what I love about the assessment is that it can highlight for you things that are within your awareness, things that you are already, conscious of. But it's also very good at highlighting things that are in your subconscious or even at the unconscious level that are, keeping you stuck or keeping you in a certain behavioral pattern that you didn't, realize. Now, in our debrief, you recognized it. So the initial thought, of course, was, which is actually kind of funny, right? It was either anger, which is level 2. Right? So self-validating.
Yeah.
But you were able to come out of it, pretty quickly, just like you are in life. And we talked about those different circumstances that show up for you where you were like, you know what, this is true. I do respond in this way. And, so the assessment itself, just because it shows a predominance of 2 for you, as we talked about, doesn't mean you're angry all the time or that you're angry for a long period of time, even under stress. It could be very quick. Yeah. It's just the initial space you go to before you start to leverage tools that then take you back up. Right. Yeah. So the same was true for me too. When I went through life coaching, this is how the assessment is available to me to give to you all. It's through our life coaching program. I did not realize either that it was just so amazingly accurate. Right. I had to really dig into my responses and make sense of it. And I got coached through it, just like you got debriefed as well by me. So it's just very helpful to have that objective person listening and understanding, well, let's put the dots together, where they can make sense so you can see this. And the other thing too, though, is we tend to look at things so at such a micro level. So, for instance, you were looking at it and the longest bar was a 2 and you were like, what? That's not what I expected. But I had to help you see, well, wait a minute, your predominance, and we talked about this in your briefing, your predominant allocation, if you will, of energy in your day-to-day is 88% anabolic. And just to help recap, and I hope we talked about this the last time in the other podcast, but there's a catabolic and anabolic energy. Catabolic is the destructive, breaks down, can be extremely useful when you need to fight or flee, right? We all have it. And so it is just a stress response that happens in our body. It's natural. It's supposed to happen. But as we all know, stress is not helpful on a chronic level. And unfortunately, I think a lot of us are having a lot of chronic stress, which means we have a lot of chronic negative, if you will, stress hormones in our body, right? But here's the thing. Anabolic is the opposite of catabolic. It builds up. It allows you to embrace creativity, see options and opportunity and things like that. But none of the levels are bad, right? That's why I put quotes, even though you all are listening to this on a podcast, you can't see us. I'm putting air quotes around the term negative for catabolic because, again, I say it's useful, but not chronically, right? We don't want to be under those stress hormones all the time. So when used in a moment of stress, when we need to be nervous maybe about a test, or nervous about being on camera, or nervous about being, giving a speech or something like that. Those stress hormones can be very helpful to us to get through that moment in time, but over time, consistently, it's not. So I want to preface that because the whole point of this podcast today is for us to not only talk about your experience, but to talk about how beautiful I think this assessment is to, and I don't necessarily love this term, but it's the one that I keep coming to, which is giving us permission to be human, right? Embracing our humanity. Like, we tend to think that we need to be perfect at all times. And I know that there are a ton of people who take this assessment, me included. When I took it, I was like, I bet you I'm resonating high. Levels 5 and 6. Guess what? This chick was not. I was I was resonating at a 3 and a 5. And the point is that we tend to just want to hope, right? That, yep, I'm at the highest level because that's the best level, right? Or that's where we want to be. But we're complex people. We are energy, divine energy, flowing through us all the time. And, that gap between level 1, which is just very egocentric, very me, and it, again, doesn't mean bad. It just means you're in your humanness.
Yeah.
It's all about me. Up to level 7, which is the divine. That's quite the range to be experiencing here on Earth, right? And I feel like our march to our best selves, whether we're pursuing it through a business, whether we're pursuing it through motherhood, whether we're pursuing it through a career, whatever it is, I feel like the march to our best selves is that. It's us walking closer and closer to that divinity, right? But we still have the struggle of being human and having this mind and having emotions and having triggers of all these other humans on the planet. Hello, children. Hello, coronavirus. Hello, all kinds of stressors that we have, right?
Yeah.
So it really does give us a broader sense of permission, in my opinion, to just be where we need to be and to choose where we want to be on that energetic path, as opposed to a personality assessment that tends to, I feel, give people permission to stay in a box. I'm just a level 8. That's just how I am. I'm a 2. That's what I do.
Yep.
I
felt the exact same way when you were saying, and I think I even said this, like, I don't like the word permission, because not that I need permission, that any of us need permission. We can do or feel whatever we need, or whatever we want. But it did give me this sense of permission because of who I am and who the business that I run. I do feel like I have to stay in a higher energy all the time. That's what people expect of me, right? And that was one of those things where I'm like, oh, I hope I'm, flying high, if you will, in those higher energies. But when we were able to see that in stressful moments, like, I don't know anybody, and maybe you've come across somebody, but I don't know anybody in a stressful moment that's going to be at a level 6, and 6 is what was
6 is equated to kind of like a synthesis mindset, which means you feel like everything is coming together for your best good. So all the pieces and parts, even the difficult ones, are coming together for your best good. So to say that any human, will default to that in a stressful moment, I'm not going to say it's impossible by any means. I'm not, because I've definitely come across some just amazing people who really have been working at this for a really long time. And that may be their default. I don't know, but I haven't met them yet.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny is that when we were talking about that, and when we saw my graph, like, my default in a situation that is stressful automatically is the anger.
Level 2.
But we also, the anger and conflict. I can't remember, conflict. Yeah.
Yep.
Which, when we were actually breaking it down, and I'll be honest on this podcast, like, this is for me to have everyone see that anything you're doing is okay. Like, all of our feelings are validated and okay. And it's fine for us to feel this, because I automatically go into a level 2 in certain situations. And it's funny because I came across, like, as I looked at the situations that have happened, and I'm able to look at my situation with maybe the salon closing with coronavirus. I didn't go into anger. I was able to resonate more where I'm like, okay, this is happening for a reason, and I'm okay with it. So it's not every situation,
right?
But we all have triggers. And my immediate trigger, and I was telling you this, was my family. We're so close, and I have a shorter fuse with that, and I immediately go into level 2. But what you help me see is that I'm able to also, it's like a dive in, and then I'm able to come right back out of it with using the tools. So it doesn't mean that I'm just angry all the time or, anything like that. But it actually showed me that it was a defense mechanism that would help me set up those boundaries with my family. And then I was able to set those boundaries and come back out of it and resonate a lot higher with them.
That's right.
So it was just interesting to me to see how not all stressful situations are the same energy either.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And you brought up an excellent point too that I don't want to lose, which is, as women, I think there's a lot of discussion about energy. We know what it means to have toxic people in the workplace, or the toxic friends, or we say, nope, that person drains my energy, right? Or like, if you're an introvert like me, right, going to a big party is going to be like, oh dear God, I don't want to do that. So already what you tend to want to stay away from versus what fuels you, right? Even if you don't articulate it, it. Okay. We also know what it means to think that our kids drain us. They exhaust us, right? And that's not to say that we don't love our children by any means. I adore my daughter, but at the same time, it can be a lot. And can we just all embrace the fact that right now it's still a challenge? We're still in a pandemic.
Yeah.
We have our kids at home with us. We have sometimes our spouses home with us. Everybody's demanding the same space. We're not really getting out as much as we're used to, right? We have all of these stressors on us.
Mm-hmm.
And so even when you are triggered, you might feel like, going back to what you and I had talked about during your debrief, and you had just mentioned family,
Mm-hmm.
right? There might be times when a particular situation normally, let's say, triggers you, but then that same experience might happen, but you're able to respond differently,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're able to have enough energy to dip into your tools. How do I need to respond? I get to choose my mindset in this moment. I'm not going to default to level 2, right? When we talk about the stress response, this is the way I interpret it, because this is how it works for me. And I think a lot of parents, and maybe even business owners, still will be able to equally understand this. There are certain times when something triggers you, and you can feel yourself going through, how should I respond? What are my options? How best to handle this? Is the client going to respond well if I offer XYZ? Will this end well, if I handle it this way, right? Your brain is so powerful. You're going through so many different options within seconds, and you're analyzing all of it, right? Even with your kids. When we get there, let's say that you encounter that client and you say XYZ and you think it's going to land well, but it doesn't land well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, all of a sudden, you might feel yourself getting a little more anxious. Maybe you're starting to feel yourself get a little tense, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can feel ourselves kind of going up and down the ladder, if you will, of frustration or of anxiety, right? Whether it's our kids, whether it's our family, whether it's the neighbor, clients, whatever it is, we can feel ourselves when we're starting to, like, okay, I'm starting to get frustrated because I don't know what else to do, right? Everybody knows what that feels like. So when you look at this report and you see your default stress reaction, what we mean by that is there's no frontal lobe consideration happening. It is your default, meaning you just went there because there was no energy left. There was no sense of control as to decide, like, what mindset or approach I want to use. I have nothing left, and my brain has decided it's going to do what it's used to doing.
Yeah.
It's going to act the way that has typically gotten you the results in the past. It's just going to go there, and it's not going to ask you, right? And that's just for self-preservation. That is your brain taking over from the frontal lobe. Frontal lobe doesn't have any more control.
Mm-hmm.
It is just the fight or flight response that's saying, we know how to handle this, right? Because we can't allow you to use up any more energy. You can't expend any more calories thinking about this. We don't have it to spare. We're just going to the default. So that's what the default stress reaction is, right? Because, we've all been there. I've been there where I've just lost my crap with my kid. And I'm like, where did that come from? Like, why was I so short-tempered? Or I lose it after 5 minutes of trying to rationalize, and I'm not getting anywhere. And then at the end, I'm like,
yeah. Well, I've been there.
Right? So even as business owners, we can get there, right? I think we have a bit more control, certainly, with clients, because, those are possibly people that we just don't have established relationships with. So we know that we have to bring it. We know we have to just keep pushing through that. Whereas we tend to kind of lose our ish with our family, because that's supposed to be our safe, loving spot, right? Where forgiveness happens. So I say all that to say, even though we have a default stress response, yours happens to be a predominant of level 2, but it's not only level 2, but that was just the predominance. One of the things that I'm going to be offering to everybody is a worksheet where you can have a cheat sheet of all of these different levels, and you'll be able to jot some notes down. And one of the things that I have on the sheet helps you ask yourself some questions about how you leverage a certain energy. So for you, Jacqueline, we talked about this, I think, at the end of your debrief, but we were also running a little short on time, I think. And so I just want to make sure that you know this too.
Mm-hmm.
Even though your default is level 2, and there is nothing wrong with that for anybody, y'all. Okay? There's nothing wrong with any of the energy levels by any means. But if you choose to say you would rather not have level 2 as your default, how do you choose a different mindset? Then you will look on the sheet and I just recommend choosing the next level. You cannot necessarily choose, yep, my default is level 2 and I want to respond at level 7. Yeah. It doesn't normally work that way, y'all. So my recommendation is just try the next level up. Just practice with the next level up. So for you, it might be looking at level 3. And level 3 is the sense of responsibility. And it's at least responsibility for how you are showing up in the moment.
Yep.
So it could be, how do I want to take responsibility for how I'm showing up in this moment? Right? And then when you think about that, you can then set the intention. If this circumstance were to happen, this is how I want to show up. And I want everybody to really get this. We talked about the default stress reaction. It's how we have behaved in the past. It's how we behave when we feel like we're out of tools. It's how we behave when we're just frustrated, right? Obviously, under stress, we have a certain condition that we have taught our body to do for years. It's habitual. Yeah. So this cannot be, today you're a predominant level 2 and tomorrow you're going to be a predominant level 3. It doesn't work like that. It takes practice. And so one of the things that I recommend to people is think about it. Think about it when you're not stressed. Start giving your brain that tool in advance. I don't want to respond this way anymore. How can I take more responsibility in the moment for how I show up? What am I willing to do, if anything, to take more responsibility for the stress in that moment, for how I show up? That's just level 3, right? Mm-hmm. Think about it when you're not stressed. You need to be able to start giving your brain that toolbox so that when the stress does come, you have it to pick out of the toolbox. You can't just expect to read something like a meme and be like, oh yeah, I got that. Yep. Doesn't work like that.
And actually that exact point is when we were done with our assessment, because I do neuro coaching and I do a lot of the energy work. So when I was done with that, I said, because I do my meditations and everything, but sometimes we don't think about those things that trigger us the most. So I actually set up a statements that go ahead and counteract that immediate stress response. That if that my kids respect me, that we're all working together as a team, and setting those things up when I'm not stressed and listening to them on a daily basis and actually changing my subconscious thought, that brain connection that goes rapid fire without me even giving it permission, changing that because I'm able to see what those levels are. And I know that I don't want to respond that way. Right. So when I need to, it's there and that's my automatic, but I want to change that, and changing that subconscious thought and being able to see where you actually land. Like when you're taking this assessment, I mean, seriously, be honest. And that was my entire purpose when I was taking this, because I remember you said something about you'll get a good response if you're honest on the question. So I tried to be super honest on the assessment. And when we went through the debriefing, I saw what my triggers were, and taking those triggers, and while I'm not stressed, while I'm not, in the middle of the situation, setting those new subconscious thoughts to try to break the other ones and rewire the ones that are going to be more sustainable for me and create a better environment for me and my family.
Exactly.
And my business and the whole thing around. But it's just this amazing thing where you get to see it all on paper, because I like having more of the brain part and the creative woo part. And when I was able to see both of those laid out on the paper and know that I have control of where I am on the scale, just because I can see it. And now I'm aware of how I react and what my triggers are, is incredibly important for all of us. And it does give us more of a sense of, we don't really have control. We all know that. But we are able to control how we respond when we're aware.
That's right. And that's what I love about this assessment, because, you know, you brought up two things. One was, you said, I think you might've said something about humanity or the data or something like that. And then the woo, right? Yeah. And like I talked about, like, I believe that that is like the struggle, but also beauty of our lives, is trying to figure out how to do both, how to listen to that spirituality, you know, however we attend to that, right? How to tap into that, how to figure out what path we're supposed to be on, where are we supposed to be, how are we supposed to be contributing, you know, what does our best self look like? But also managing that with just the challenge that is being a human. That I really do believe that that's what we are supposed to be here to do. And so the fluidity that is allowed with this assessment, I think it's just so beautiful. And that's the other part of this, where the default responses that we do, that our brain does, are habitual in nature, and they are for our best benefit, because our brain has got to be able to conserve calories and energy for the things that matter. And when we do something so consistently over and over and over and over, it's like, I got this. I know how to handle this. Yep, I've seen this before, right? It just does it. And that is when we're in the dark. We have no awareness of that happening. We don't think about what foot we put out on the floor when we get out of bed. We don't necessarily have to think about the fact that we have to brush our teeth, right? We don't think about a lot of things because our brain is masterful at trying to handle the things that do and should be, by the way, on autopilot. Sometimes we talk about autopilot being this awful thing. No, it's not. No. It's only awful if it's something we don't like.
Yeah.
So when we do gain that awareness through something like this assessment, or from someone else's statement to us or observation or whatever it is, just even our own awareness, feeling icky about it, that's when we can do something about it. And so that's why I love the assessment, because it really, like we talked about, it's so validating to think of yourself as one way and then see it mirrored back to you in a report. And then also other things that you didn't even know about. You're like, whoa, gosh, that is true, you know, because then you can self-reflect on it. And now all of a sudden you have awareness of it, which means now you have the power to change it. Because beforehand, if you didn't have awareness, you're not going to change it, because you don't necessarily know that you can, number one. And number two, you don't know how.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and that's the beauty of seeing these autopilot things, because with my coaching, like, we pull out some of the autopilot thoughts, those subconscious thoughts that without our permission come through, and we can't do anything about it if we don't know that it's happening. Right. That, like, it's just that response. But when we're able to, and like you said, now we have a choice. And when we have choice, we have power.
Absolutely.
And when we have that power, we can go in and change those subconscious autopilot thoughts for us. So now instead of them, a lot of them, like, I don't want to have to think about brushing my teeth or the daily things. I want those to be on autopilot. But my immediate stress response, maybe I don't want it to be at a 2, especially in certain situations. And like I brought up earlier with my family, I have taken those things that I tapped into, saw my triggers, and then I'm creating a new auto response. And that's what I love doing with my clients, is creating that new auto response. And it takes time and it takes dedication, but being able to see that, especially when we're not just making it, we feel like we're making it up ourselves, like we see it on paper, the two go hand in hand. Like just being able to see that and then have the power to change it is such a beautiful thing that most of us don't get a chance to really see. So that's why I was really excited to have you back on to talk about this. And I wanted to be open and vulnerable and say, what my levels were and where I was resonating, because I know so many other people can relate to it. And I want to give, everyone like that permission to just be open with yourself and find those triggers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just lean into the fact that we are complex and we do not fit into a box. And I don't want to shame anybody else by any means, but I'm just not one who wants to take a personality test and think, yep, I'll always be an Enneagram 8. Yep, that's just me. Yeah. I want to change. I want to evolve. I want to grow. I want to become better all the time. Doesn't mean that I feel like there's necessarily anything wrong with me right now. I am imperfect and I'm perfect all at the same time. And what is my next level of perfection and imperfection? I just want to keep growing. And my assessment, or the assessment, I should say, that I offer, I feel just provides a much better roadmap, right? It actually lets you see your potential.
Yeah.
Instead of just, yep, here's your stamp.
Yeah. And I will have to say, the personality test, I also really love.
I do too.
Also because they're two completely different beasts,
Mm-hmm.
where one, the personality test, you're put in a box, but really you can also use that to see, okay, so this is why I tick the way I do. So we don't have to allow it to keep us in the box. It just starts to make a little bit of sense. And then when you're talking about in business, going through a personality test, and when you're hiring and you're bringing on clients and you're bringing on, people onto your team, knowing personalities makes for really good teams, because some personalities just don't mesh. And that doesn't mean that we don't want to be better or that it's in a box, but we are who we are too, like that's just facts in our the way we run. So having that type of assessment is really beneficial in certain situations.
Mm-hmm.
But to grow and to have more of control over how we react and how we go about our daily basis, that is the beautiful thing about the assessment that you do, because the two assessments, it's like you really get a chance to really see who you are, why you like to do the things that you do and how you work, but then you're able to control the energy on a regular basis and in stressful situations and take that power back to actually change those auto things. Because in the personality test, you're just not going to get that type of detail. So I think there's always a place for both, but that's actually the beauty of expanding and being able to see all of these different tools that we can have.
Yeah. And I definitely don't want to dismiss out of hand personality tests by any means, but in my experience with clients, they just tend to have taken them because they're popular, of course, and they're very easy usually to access. But then they use it as a crutch, if you will. And it's just, it's not a conscious choice, right? But they just then think, okay, that is me. And then this will always be me. And I'm just like, oh, no, it doesn't have to be, And so that's what I love. I think, both of them can complement each other for sure.
Most definitely. And I've seen that, and I've been victim to the crutch, using it as a crutch as well.
I used to.
Absolutely. We all do. We all have those things where we just kind of accept it. But that's the beauty of opening up and seeing what levels we're at, and just learning more and more tools. That's why I was so happy to see the difference of what you did. Because, I told you before, like, I wasn't sure what to expect because I had personality test in my head when I went to go take yours, because that's just what's popular.
Yeah.
But I thought this was amazing. And I love that you offer this. And I think it just is such a eye-opening experience. So for anyone who wants to see where they're at on their levels and where they fall on a daily basis, and if they want to start growing and changing those subconscious automatic responses, please take the assessment. Tina is amazing, and you just went over everything such in detail that it really helped see that it's not good or bad, that we really just have this power to change.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. IPEC, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, is who I got my certification through. And their mission is to raise the consciousness of the world one person at a time. And so that's really what I want to do as well, because it felt like when I went through coaching, it felt like somebody turned on the light switch and I didn't even know the lights were off. And so it's amazing and it's powerful. And I offer the assessment even outside of coaching. Like, you don't get coaching with the assessment. I just debrief you on exactly, what the results were. And we talk about how it shows up in your life. And, that's it. You can always obviously opt for coaching after, but you do not have to. It's offered as a standalone as well.
Wonderful. And like every other episode, I will have all the details on the blog. So if you want to check out more information, I've got a download from you, the worksheet, right?
Yep.
So that'll be on the blog. You can go down, download it, check out the different levels and the questions. And then you'll also have a link to be able to take the assessment with Tina on there. So
Yep.
Like every time, it's such a pleasure getting to talk to you. And I really hope that all of you viewers were able to just get some great information from this and start giving yourself permission to just be your human self, and that we're all in it together. And all we want to do is raise the awareness, the amazing energy that we can bring to the world. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me again. I appreciate it.
Of course. Do you want to say anything else before we sign off?
No, I just want to be able to encourage everybody to become aware of, how they show up in the world, and to remind them that they always have a choice. So even if something feels like it's just part of the job or it's just the way it is, I encourage you to ask a coach or a therapist or a counselor, somebody, if that's actually fact, or if it's just the way that you think about it, because you could be limiting yourself. So just get out there and live your best life. Do whatever it takes.
I love it. Yep. And I challenge everyone to just look at the different side of the coin. There's always different perspectives. And if we can just flip the coin on the other side and see what we might be missing, we might be surprised. So
that's right.
Thank you again. Thank you to all my viewers for being on here. Leave us a message. Let us know how this was for you, what you got out of this episode. Share it with your friends, anybody who you know might need this in their lives. We want to be there to help and support them. Thank you, and we'll see you next week on the next show. Thank you so much for listening today. Please make sure that you go over to the blog and follow all the links for our guests and get the downloads that we talked about. I would also really love and appreciate if you would share this podcast with your friends and family. And if you wouldn't mind taking just a minute to leave a review, that would mean the world to me. Thank you again so much from the bottom of my heart for listening and staying tuned. Can't wait to see you next week on the show.